By the time you watch this, it's my birthday. And I've noticed something about the 7-year cycle. Maybe you have it in your life too. So while every day is a day to be grateful, there's something about a birthday. I think as you get older, people have different perspectives in terms of what it means to turn a year older, what it means to grow, to get old. And a lot of times we downplay the significance of what it means to actually have made it another year and what the years have communicated to you up until this point. And I know for me, I like to pay attention to numbers. I like to pay attention to patterns. I like to pay attention to consistencies. I like to pay attention to serendipity. I like to pay attention to coincidences. And I've noticed something about the cycle of 7. Now, if you guys are into, I'd say like spirituality or just like energy or, birth times and all that good stuff, you've probably heard of the cycle of 7. Growing up, I used to hear about, every 7 years your allergies change, or every 7 years a human sheds all their skin and starts new. I've also heard the concept that if a friendship can make it past 7 years, then they'll be friends for life. Some may be more true than others. Some just sound a little bit better. But I know for me, in my experiences with the 7 years, this is now another 7 years for me, there have been some very interesting patterns in terms of change. I remember 7 years ago, around this time, things were changing in a big way. And changing means that there were certain things that were falling apart. In my head, there were things around me that were breaking down, foundations that were crumbling. And there were some relationships that were starting 7 years ago. And all of this was kind of happening at the same time, right? Everything was kind of starting to take place. Sometimes when we are due for a change, there's a lot of destruction that happens, or a lot of dismantling. It's not always destruction. It may seem like chaos. It may seem like the end of the world, but it really is just room being made, or you growing, or you shedding skin, or things coming into development. And I know for me, 7 years ago, when I really think about it, was a very interesting and pivotal time. Mentally, emotionally, energetically, and even in relationships. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. Okay, I can think back actually 7 years ago and where I was and what life looked like and how much has changed each year since then. And I think about certain relationships that were starting 7 years ago. And then I realized in year 7 of those relationships starting, either some have fallen away or some have kind of developed into something new. It's a very interesting process when you look at the 7-year span. If you're in this space where you are at this space of, let's say, an impasse, or things seem confusing, or things seem heavy, or just changing in a very scary way. Right? And I'll use the word scary because a lot of times we fear change. We fear change because we're not always in control of it. We fear change because it's happening so quickly. We fear change because we think we are doing something bad, or bad things are taking place. If you are in that space where conflict is starting to become a little bit more constant, confusion is happening, you feel restless, those are all indications typically that there is a change brewing. And I speak from experience, not in some, woo-woo kind of way, but let's think about how big the world is and the fact that we exist on a globe that spins without our participation, and we're just existing on it. So the fact that we think we are in control of everything and that there aren't things that are outside of us taking place, I think is very human behavior. Very big ego. It's giving very big ego. But to lean into this idea and trust that, hey, maybe there are things bigger than me that are taking place for me. Maybe I need to be a participant for the things that I ask for. Okay, there's so much that I envision. If it was just a simple thought, if it was bigger, I told myself, 7 years, or within this time, by this age, in this space, I would be I don't want to say I'd be a different person, but a lot of things would be different for me. And within these 7 years, I created that difference. We don't always pay attention to how hard or how much we're actually working to make things differently. And working doesn't always mean just working at a job 24/7. Working means doing this deep emotional work. Working means taking a good look in the mirror. Working means recognizing how you talk to yourself. That's the work. Whenever we talk about work, we think about busyness, but sometimes work simply just looks like rest. How often have I been able to rest my spirit in the last 7 years? What have I actually gone through and experienced in the last 7 years? And when I tell you it's been a lot, it has been a lot. So to sit here on my birthday and think about how far I've actually come, not just through happenstance, but literally through my intentional efforts to make change, it's a world of difference, y'all. And I encourage you to lean into and trust that there is a pattern that takes place in your life. If you're willing to look into it, if you're willing to be uncomfortable, okay, if you're willing to trust, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work. For me, I'm a curious person and I do like puzzles, so I will pay attention to patterns and seeing where things fit. Doesn't mean I don't have resistance along the way. Trust me, there has been a lot of resistance, a lot of doubt in certain ways. And then in other spaces, I just felt the need to trust. It felt easy and things just fell into place the way they needed to. Literally, my ability to sit here and talk to you right now in this very moment, if I was to put it on a piece of paper or write a story, you'd probably be like, no way. There's no way that this all happened the way this all took place. Absolutely not. And when I talk about there being changes, even in relationships, the timing of how things happen and when things happen, or even how, is something to really explore, something to be studied, because as much as we try to make sense of certain experiences, it just doesn't always make sense. Your life definitely has a pattern, and it's important for you to look at, what do I value? What have I said I desired for this extended period of time? How much closer am I to it? And sometimes, truthfully, what we are superficially pursuing may not be it. And you'll know that because of the frustration you continue to have doing those things. And frustration is not the same thing as, simple conflict or a little bit of agitation while you're trying to get ahead because you hit a wall somewhere. That's different. Because when you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, when you are actually in the space of what you say you want and desire, things just work out. Things just play out. And you are a part of it. It's not things just play out because I'm sitting on a couch and I'm doing absolutely nothing. No, even who you are in spirit and in your practice is always working towards what it is that you are seeking. And you'll notice, okay, if you notice that you're starting to change a little bit, or if the change is actually happening, you'll notice how your relationships become a little bit more engaged and intense. Okay, and intensity doesn't mean that you guys are always fighting. Intensity just means that, hey, I'm starting to see or feel things a little bit deeper than what I used to. Or I'm actually starting to recognize what was sustaining this relationship for this long. Or I may recognize that, man, I'm not connected to this person at all. Maybe up until this time, it was proximity. Maybe up until this time, it was a trauma bond. Maybe up until this time, it was just simply convenience. Maybe up until this time, I was lonelier. Or maybe up until this time, I hadn't learned what I needed to about myself or about this other individual. And the work will show. Because when you do start taking a little bit more intentional effort to live your life, to live your purpose, or another person doing it on their end, what's incongruent won't last. So the whole, if you've been friends with somebody for 7 years, you will continue to be friends. That may not always live true. Because in 7 years, you can learn a lot about what was sustaining a relationship, health or history. And if it's just been the history, if it's just been the patterns, then The more you start taking care of yourself and the more you start being intentional, the more your life is starting to adapt and mold to what it is that you desire or what fits your purpose, certain relationships may not live. They don't have room to. And it will be interesting how it all happens. Sometimes it's just the easy fade out. Other times it's a very turbulent experience. Other times it might be a mutual understanding and a lack of connection on both sides. It is a very interesting process. The more you try to fight for those connections, the more of a fight it will be. You'll find yourself being heavy. If there's one thing I learned, sometimes we don't realize how one thing is connected to something else in our lives, right? We see them as separate. But I want you to start to recognize who I am and wherever I go, whether it's to my job, whether it's to my family, whether it's to my friends, whether it's to the supermarket. I am the same person everywhere I go, which means that the energy is the same. If I'm existing in a relationship that is fulfilling, right? It's going to carry over. If I nurture that relationship properly and I nurture myself properly, it's going to carry over into those other spaces. However, if I have a historical representation of a lack of self-worth, not just in my work, not just in my habits, but also in my relationships, that means that I'm going to be blind to anything that is actually good for me. I'm also going to resist it until I start to wake up to what this actual conflict is here. Then I start to change. And that change can be scary because you might start falling out with people you've been connected with for the longest time. And they may say certain things, they may do certain things that seem a little bit out of character, but it's probably necessary. Like I said, I'm so grateful for birthdays because it always gives me an opportunity to reflect. This birthday is no different. It is so significant, okay? And 7 has always been one of my favorite numbers. I don't know why, but it has always been a number. I remember back in college, a buddy of mine, we taped, this is a core memory too, we taped numbers on the back of our sweatshirts, and mine was a number 7. Don't know why, just always loved 7. And I saved that number 7, that piece of tape, I saved that for years and I had it on my wall until I didn't need it anymore. Start taking stock of your life because it may not always be an accident. It may not always be such this crazy coincidence. Sometimes there is purpose, and even the coincidence itself has a purpose. I'm so grateful to be doing this because I believe the podcast turns 7 this year too. If I'm not mistaken, the podcast turns 7 this year. So it's all making sense if you ask me. All right, I'm no expert, but all I can tell you is that every 7 years, there has been a significant change in my life for the better. And now I'm in this space of 7 where I'm like, yeah, you know what? It was all worth it. I'm in such a healthier place. I'm in such a more peaceful space. Okay? What I do, who I'm around, how I show up has changed in a very big way. And it's been worth it. So, I'll say this to you as I say it to myself. Sometimes when things are falling apart, or it seems like things are falling apart, there's so much that's fallen into place. And you need to have room to build that bigger life, build that bigger dream, build those healthier relationships that you desire. You need to have room for those things to exist. So if you find yourself being a little bit resistant, a little fearful, a little doubtful, pay attention. Look at the history. What has been going on in my life for the last 7 years? What has changed significantly in the last 7 years? Look at your people. Some people who you thought you would have in your life for the rest of your life, and now the idea of a relationship with them probably doesn't even make sense. When you think about them, your heart used to light up. But now it just seems like, oh, this is a person in my memory. Maybe certain things that you used to love doing don't really resonate as much. Or maybe there are other things that you're revisiting that do seem to have a place now that you do desire. I know for me, I talked about this recently, like drawing. It hasn't been a priority for me as of late. And now I feel like it's starting to come back around. And I'm excited. I'm also noticing that there are other things that are starting to come into this space. See your birthdays as milestones, not just another year where you've gotten older, but see it as an opportunity, see it as a win. This is another year I've made it through. 365 days, 52 weeks. I've managed to make it through. And how awesome is that? And if life doesn't feel like it's the greatest right now, I want you to understand that every day is an opportunity to do something a little bit differently. I'm big on gratitudes, and I'm big on actual intentional gratitudes. And sometimes if you were to look at my list of gratitudes, you'd probably be like, wait, what the heck is this? But it has a purpose because it reminds me that even the small things that seem insignificant truly do matter. So I'm grateful that I get to share my birthday with you guys. I'm grateful for another year. I'm grateful for another 7 years. And I am truly lucky that everything that has happened up until this point has been a part of where I am today. How cool is that? Take care of yourselves. Take inventory. Take care of each other. Take flight.